Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife, Janet, and we are streaming live from downtown Palm Springs, California. It might Not sure if you guys can still hear us. It looks like our internet dropped out, but this might look like a green screen back here, but it's actually not. You will maybe see the sunrise this morning on the podcast with us. The sun is coming up in Palm Springs. I got to tell you, it's a little bit chilly this morning.
Got my blanket.
Yeah, and Jen are covered up in a blanket. We want to do this outside instead of but we're talking about hormones and the long-term benefits of hormones because, those of you that follow Janet and I know that Janet and I talk about hormones 95% of the time. That's what we do at work. And so, but when there's a lot of misconceptions about hormones, and some people think, oh, I have hot flashes, I need hormones. Oh, I have decreased libido, I need hormones. But there's so many more benefits of hormones than just short-term things like that. Not that those things aren't good. And long-term, there's consequences of having hot flashes if you're not sleeping. And long-term, there's consequences of not having sex. We talk about it all the time that healthy people have regular sex, and regular sex keeps you healthy. So, but what are some of the other long-term benefits of hormone replacement, Janet?
Well, if you've heard us talk before, we define what hormone is, and there's more than just one type of hormone, but a hormone is actually a messenger. So it's not just our reproductive era of our life that these hormones are important to. I'm going to talk about estradiol because for women, we just think of that as having babies. We think of, having our cycle. But estradiol helps with our brain health and our cognitive memory. It helps with the vascularity of our vessels as far as the health of our vessels. So not only is it going to help prevent things like dementia and Alzheimer's and keeping a good memory, but it's also going to help with our cardiovascular system to keep us from having heart attacks or strokes. So we've kind of mislabeled it as just a sex hormone, and it's not. It helps with our skin. It helps with our gut. It helps with our bones. So it's not just having babies or having a cycle. There's more to it than just that. And I personally know many women that have suffered from loss of memory. It's difficult for the family. It's difficult for them. That is something that's really preventable on most levels as we age, especially when we get past menopause.
The number one killer of not just Americans in general, but also of women is cardiovascular disease. And hormone optimization can help protect your cardiovascular system and prevent cardiovascular disease, heart attack, and stroke. Um, you know, we get fed this fear about hormones and cancer, and of course, just a few weeks or months ago, the FDA basically admitted that the WHI study that talked about hormones, specifically estrogens, causing cancer and causing heart attacks, that study was completely bad study, which we've been saying that for 25 years now. But that study was scaring women about hormone replacement and causing cancer, yet more women are dying from cardiovascular disease than dying from cancer. So if you want to live a healthy life, as an American, you want to prevent yourself, and a long life, you want to prevent yourself from having a heart attack, mostly because that's what kills most Americans. And one of the ways to do that is hormone replacement. Now, that doesn't mean that the hormone replacement is an end all fix all. You still have to eat well, sleep well, move well, but hormones are a piece of the puzzle. Janet?
Yeah, I'm going to totally agree with that. And we have to be very specific about this because there's a lot of confusion with influencers and people that haven't been trained properly about what estrogen is good for women. And the only two estrogen and bone I think are really important to understand because there's people out there that they will prescribe birth control pill, they will prescribe synthetic estrogens all day long without even blinking, but they actually put you to the hormone estriol because that is really important for preventative things for women as we age. I talked about the bladder. It helps with the sphincter of the bladder to be strong and the tone to be there. And leakage is a huge problem after having children or going through menopause because that bladder becomes weak. Um, that being said, it's not only the incontinence thing that is a problem for women, it's also recurrent urinary tract infections. Hormones, especially estradiol, keep the balance of the the balance of the organisms that we have on our body in check. So it helps to prevent urinary tract infections. It helps with the tone, so you don't have as many. And as a young woman, or young women, we don't necessarily think urinary tract infection is a big deal. But then when you start getting into your 70s and 80s and 90s, many times women will suffer from them and they're a chronic repeat. Repeat, repeat, go to the doctor, get an antibiotic, go to the doctor, get an antibiotic. Many times the therapy turns into, well, we're going to fix that for you. We're going to give you a mesh or a device to help support the bladder. Well, that's only good for so long. And if you aren't doing all the other things to stay healthy, you might reach a point like my mother did in her 80s where there was no way they were going to put another mesh in. Her tissue wasn't pliable or healthy enough to do that. So then you're stuck with a catheter. And I personally don't want that because that means that most of the time, women that do get a catheter at that age, their mobility and their mental and emotional health changes. They don't feel like going to church. They don't feel like going to get their hair cut. There's all kinds of stigma that comes with their lifestyle after getting a catheter. And I think we failed women when they end up having to have that.
And another solution for um, chronic UTIs is obviously antibiotics. So, how many elderly women are on chronic antibiotics? The go-to for that is nitrofurantoin, macrobid, macrodantin, and there's consequences from taking long-term antibiotics when all the women really need a little bit of estrogen, and that will all go away. Plus, you get a lot of other benefits from.
For the reason of previous cancers, estriol has no affinity to the breast tissue. So super safe. We've had many women that have called us over the years and have said, hey, you saved our life. And, when somebody says that to you, you want them to define, what do you mean by that? Well, if you couldn't drive across town and now you can, that did save somebody's life because they actually have not only longevity, but they have a thrive in their life. They no longer feel restricted about staying in their house. And we know that the less interaction we have with other human beings, our lives are not as fulfilling.
So we've talked about long-term benefits of hormones being um, bladder, urinary symptoms for women. What about osteoporosis and bone health, Janet?
So, um, big pharma and the standard of care for women that have or are osteopenic or having osteoporosis is basically giving women a medication therapy that maintains the bone that are already made in your body. So it just keeps the bone that's there. The problem I have with that is over time that bone becomes brittle. It's not being replaced. Our bones are not like rocks. They are a dynamic tissue that needs to be tore down and replaced regularly. So when we give women things like Fosamax or Prolia, basically we're maintaining old bone. So if you fall and you have old bone, your bones not just break, they crumble. It's much easier to help somebody heal a bone that's broken versus a crumbled bone. Once it's crumbled, it there's not much you can do for that. And that is a huge issue as we age because if we break a hip and we have a severe break, chances are we're not going to be living past 2 years. And that's just a unfortunate failure, I think, on the medical side because there are three hormones, and you've heard us talk about this again. And there's other things out there. I mean, I should probably say four. Vitamin D, which is totally important for the absorption
And a hormone.
and is a hormone based structure for the absorption of calcium into the bone. But things like progesterone, which you heard us talk about before, progesterone actually signals the body to make new osteoblasts, which are the cells that make new bone cells, right? So we want new cells being made and laid down. And if you're deprived of progesterone, most likely you are not making new bone cells. And that to me is probably a root cause of lack of progesterone for not making new cells. And then on top of it, we need testosterone. And that is one thing that's been talked to quite often now in social media with influence. Actually, if we're healthy, have more testosterone level than we do an estradiol level, which is kind of overlooked in biology now from the health care world. But if you have a good level of testosterone, then your bones become stronger. If you have a good level of estradiol, then your bones maintain the strong bone cells that
Excuse me.
need to have. And of course, like we've said, lifestyle matters. As we age, we need protein to build. We need the amino acids from the proteins to build that bone, and we need resistance training.
And we would love to have answer any questions that you have about hormone replacement. So, Stephanie Collier, we thank you for watching and engaging. Um, one of many of the things we've just talked about are some of the lies that we learned in pharmacy school, and I am writing a book about it called "Lies I Learned in Pharmacy School and How to Escape the Grasp of Big Pharma." I'm showing the picture of the cover up there, and at the bottom it's scrolling. You can text lies, LIES, to 833-495-3426 to opt in for updates. We've got the first couple chapters written. We're looking at having the book released in December of this year, so don't miss out on that. It's going to be there's going to be a lot of good information in there, just about how to our goal is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health, and this book will definitely help that. So let's talk about men. When the stuff we've been talking about applies to men also. Um, Osteoporosis in men should
Never happen.
never happen. And when I see old man bent over walking with a walker and he's got osteoporosis, it makes me want to vomit. Matter in general, we have failed that person, and one of the ways the reason that men get osteoporosis is the same reason as women. Mostly it's due to lack of testosterone.
Right.
We are taught in pharmacy school how important estrogen is for bone, but we're not taught how important how important testosterone is. And think about this: men get osteoporosis also. Is it from lack of estrogen? No, it's from lack of testosterone. Same for women. Most doctors don't know that. And contrary to what some of the influencers are saying out there, And that's just absolutely not true. Many a man is denied testosterone because their labs are normal. And then we have the extreme end where they have osteoporosis and we're giving them some crazy drug that doesn't make their bones stronger. It just makes them more dense but more brittle.
Right.
So we failed those people.
So, so what happens when Sean's talking about the labs is that these labs take a um, stat, all the people that have came in and had labs drawn. Well, think about who is having the labs drawn. It's usually somebody that's coming in with a problem. So they're already having an existing underlying problem. So they're skewed. So they don't show what a healthy lab should be for somebody. And when we've went to conferences and we're listening to social media and they're talking about how men get everything that they want, that's just not true. They sometimes will not treat a man unless his testosterone level is less than 300. I don't know any man out there that wants a level of testosterone of 300 because his existence is sad. It's not just his
There are
bones.
some men that do okay
Mm,
on that,
mm,
but yeah, but
okay,
yeah.
what is okay?
Well, right,
What is
right,
okay? Because I personally think that we've missed the mark. And
yes,
so what I'm saying is that when you get all this stuff being said about how men have been treated better than women, that's just not the case. We've failed men miserably, and it isn't just his bones. I think there's a lot of prostate health, cardiovascular health. His We know that testosterone makes a big difference in his mental and emotional health. Depression seems to disappear, probably for women too, but there's no better drug out there that can help somebody with their mood. If you have low testosterone, a lot of times men, and it also is probably because it does hold in more oxygen with our blood, too, with our red blood cells. But you know what? Don't feel like doing anything. I want to be that 90-year-old that's out there with the rest of the world doing things.
yeah, for sure. And talking about men and prostate health, when we talk about how men have been treated horribly in
Oh,
the healthcare system, prostate's a perfect example. 50 years ago, the standard of care was for prostate health was we castrate men. We literally cut off their testicles. And there's still a few of those guys alive. Maybe not anymore. We used to have a patient that happened to, and you should see what it did to his body. It basically turned him into a weak man. He had no muscle tone.
yeah.
He had all kinds of cardiovascular problems. He had erectile dysfunction. He couldn't have sex at all. So he was married. And now how we treat testosterone or how we treat prostate cancer, we don't cut their testicles off. We just give them a drug that makes their testicles don't work. And it completely depletes them of testosterone. And maybe it saves them from prostate cancer, but then they die of a heart attack or they fall down and break a bone and then die miserably in a nursing home a year later. So, let's just face it, our healthcare system for men and women in the United States both suck when it comes to treating chronic disease and especially hormone replacement.
Right. So there's again some maybe lost information or just people aren't up on the information, but most men don't die from prostate cancer. Most men will eventually die of cardiovascular. So that's why, I mean, we know in the United States that's a number one killer and has been for a long time, for decades. And we really haven't changed that. It's actually gotten worse. So, how also helps in this way, it helps to maintain and help build good, strong, lean muscle. And as we age, we want to maintain that as much as we can. Um, so why do I want that? Well, your heart's a muscle. We want a good, strong heart. And if we have good, strong muscles, we're going to move more, right? We're going to keep moving. And the last thing that I want to see is somebody that's not moving. Because if they're not living a life, they're existing. If they're not thriving, they're
Yeah.
existing. And to me, that's painful and sad. We've totally failed that. Why is muscle important to us? Well, again, we want to keep moving. So if there's no better drug to help with that, and we do know, overuse is bad. We're not talking about that. We're talking about therapeutic levels that get people in shape and keep them there.
Yeah. And everybody, that's different for everybody.
Right.
An optimal testosterone is different for everybody. Um, so, the important thing is to get a baseline when you're younger. So in your 20s and 30s. And, eventually you might need testosterone replacement when some of the symptoms of low testosterone start coming on: decreased libido, apathy, decreased recovery from workouts,
Lack of sleep.
fat around the middle, decreased lean body mass, depression, erectile dysfunction. All those things are symptoms of low testosterone. So if you're starting to get those symptoms, then you definitely need to get your testosterone rechecked. Hopefully you have a baseline. Either way, it doesn't really matter. It'd be nice to have a baseline to compare where you need to be when you didn't have symptoms. But if you go to a specialist, a hormone specialist, then they're going to know how to dose your testosterone. Speaking of specialists and speaking of education, Jen and I are going to be going to a hormone conference. Actually, it starts tonight. The welcome reception starts tonight. And we're going to be going over 3 days of education on specific topics on hormones, more advanced topics. And Dr. Neil Rosier, who we've had on this podcast before, is going to be the featured speaker, along with Dr. Nicole Lavatt, who was on our podcast a few weeks ago, to talk about how estradiol doesn't cause clots. Oral estradiol does not cause blood clots, but we talked about many other subjects too. Go back and look up that podcast episode a few weeks ago, because there's a lot of information packed into 54 minutes.
Right.
And stay tuned for some little short clips of that coming out too. There's a lot of good information coming out of that podcast. We appreciate doctors like Dr. Lavatt and Dr. Rosier. Speaking of specialists that are hormone specialists, I did a little post on Facebook yesterday about some red flags of people that are hormone specialists, because there's a lot of influencers out there now that hormones are a big topic. And some of the influencers have not been doing it for very long, but now all of a sudden they're experts because they got popular in social media, because they've written a book or been on Oprah or whatever. And here's two of the red flags this is just two of the big red flags that I would see with hormone specialists. So if they bill insurance, that's a red flag. That means they're working for the insurance company. They're not working for the patient. Second one is if they solely will prescribe FDA approved products, that's a red flag. That means they trust the FDA. And as you guys know, if you follow us, the FDA cannot be trusted. COVID was a perfect example. So if any doctor is out there saying that they trust the FDA, I don't care whether it's about vaccines or COVID shots, or whether it's about hormones or anything for that matter. We should not be trusting the FDA. We should trust our own knowledge and our own research. And that's one of the things I'm writing about in my book, also, Lies I Learned in Pharmacy School, is that we need to be rational thinkers and not trust government organizations.
So my litmus test is, and this is true for if they're out there talking or anybody that's doing hormone replacement, if they don't know the difference between a progesterone and a progestin. So I know Shawn and I have talked about this before, but progesterone itself is something that our bodies make. Progestin is not. It's synthetic. The most common one out there is of a progestin is Provera, but there's also IUDs that they're using this in, and birth control pills. And I've had many women say, "Oh, I'm safe. I'm good. I have progesterone." And then you find out, no, you really don't. So if they don't know the difference, they don't know what they're talking about.
Do not get hormones
right?
from them. If they don't know that's the most basic.
That's my litmus test. And here's one of the reasons why. And this is how, it's just black and white in my brain. Progesterone maintains a pregnancy. Progestins are birth control pill, and they're synthetic.
Pretty
So
big difference.
there's a huge difference.
Even though
So
we're taught that they're the same in
they're
pharmacy
not.
school.
So that's a big difference. And when we talk about this, it's really important because there's a lot of people out there that are going to be prescribing all these synthetic things because the black box warning has been taken off and it's in the media, and you have a false sense of, hey, I'm doing my hormone replacement and I'm getting healthy. But if you are using the synthetics, you're not.
Right, which is like the birth control. If they think that, if your doctor thinks that that's hormone replacement, get a new doctor. Another thing, it's not synthetic, but it's definitely not bioidentical, is Premarin.
Oh yeah.
If the doctor prescribes Premarin, I mean, don't get hormones from them. If Premarin stands for pregnant mare's urine. It comes from horse pee. Literally, it is isolated. The estrogens are isolated from horse pee. It is not the same as what humans make up. So if your doctor is prescribing that, get a new doctor.
Right. So we talked about progesterone, estradiol, testosterone, and we could probably be talking about all those in just one day. But one thing I think, or one hormone that's overlooked a lot for people is thyroid.
Oh, yeah.
So one of the things that happens is that you go in and they test your TSH and you fall in this range, which I think is crazy. It's way off in my opinion, but they never really look at what your free T4 levels are and your active T3. And those things are really important. Why are they important? Well, thyroid helps your immune system, your metabolism, cardiovascular.
Brain, libido.
Exactly. So here's the thing. All these hormones are important because they play off each other and they work together and give signals throughout our body at certain times that we need certain functions to happen. So that doesn't stop when we get past menopause or we age. We need that for the rest of our life. And there's many people I think that are shortchanged, especially with thyroid, because many physicians say, "Oh, you're fine, you're in the range." But if your hair is falling out, if you're sensitive to cold, if you're sensitive to getting an infection, if you're tired, exhausted all the time, it could be your thyroid hormone.
For sure. And low thyroid symptoms mimic low testosterone symptoms. So that's why it's important to get them both checked and go optimizing hormones. That is billing insurance, is they follow insurance protocol. The insurance companies tell them what to do. They're not doing it on their own. They are basically told what to do, what to prescribe, what's on formulary, and that's not always that's not. I'm not going to say always. I'm going to say that's never what's the best for you. Insurance companies do not have the patient's best interest in mind at all. They have their pocketbook in mind, and that is it. So they're going to give something that is less expensive, and they're getting a kickback from the pharmaceutical company based on what the doctor prescribes. So that's what the formulary means. It's not because it's the best drug that fits you.
So we haven't talked about cortisol, but cortisol is a hormone that we need to survive. It helps us give us the flight mode if we need it. Why am I talking about cortisol? Well, it trumps all the other hormones in our body. We need the right level. If we have too high, it's not good. If it's too low, it's not good. That isn't always addressed with taking cortisol. Sometimes it comes with activity. That's something we can control. So, what do I mean by activity? I mean good exercise in our life, good stress relieving habits. And that can look differently for everybody, but we all need to address, especially in, I think, in the American culture, but other cultures have a good way of dealing with it. They meditate, they pray, they do yoga, whatever that looks like, whether you paint, whether you listen to music, whether you just take the time to have, maybe a cup of tea or coffee and sit outside. There's many forms of dealing with stress and anxiety, but those are things that we need to do on a daily basis to be healthy. And we can't have too high and too low. If you have too high, then you're always stressed and you aren't going to sleep, and eventually it's going to tank. And why is that important? Because we need a good level in the morning, drop off in the evening, and when we get to evening, we need to sleep. And sleep is the number one thing that you could do for your health, because that's when your body is taking and repairing and doing all the work. We used to tell our teenage boys, it's not the work in the gym that's making you strong. It's when you get to bed and sleep that your body's building that tissue and that bone and those muscles. So don't shortchange that. We as a human are responsible for our body, and we need to be responsible for dealing with stress in our life. And if that would be the one thing I
Sleep.
think to take away from is, you are in charge of that. Deal with it, learn tools, what works for you. You notice we're sitting outside. I'm a big believer that we need to be a part of the world that we were meant to live in. That means you get outside and be outside in the outdoors.
It makes things so much better. And sleep trumps it all, just like Janet says. Over diet, over exercise, sleep trumps it all. That's when we get stronger, not when we work out. We get stronger when we sleep and we recover. And it's surviving on a few hours of sleep. That's nothing to brag about.
No.
And when somebody says that to me, I'm like, I'm sorry, you're just going to die young. I mean, Janet and I get as much sleep as we can, at least 8 hours a night, and we take regular naps too. So, well, that about covers this episode. We thank you guys for tuning in. Please, if you enjoyed this, you think somebody else needs to see it, please share it. We stream live on Facebook. We stream live on YouTube and X and Rumble. And like us on those platforms. We also are on the podcast forums. If you listen to podcasts, please like, share, comment, ask questions. We love having questions. Follow us on Instagram. Our Instagram account is our biggest following. We have over 115,000 followers on Instagram, and we're about ready to go live on Instagram right now. So our Instagram is Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Look us up, follow us. We answer lots of questions on there, and it's just a live Q&A session with the pharmacist. So we thank you for tuning in today. Tune in Monday to our regularly scheduled podcast, 12:30 to 1:30 Pacific Standard Time. Thank you for tuning in.